Hey everybody, this is Channel Chris, and this video is a follow-up to a video I made about a year ago, The Truth About the Banned Shoes, kind of an early history of the Air Jordan 1s. And it's a video I'm very proud of, and if you haven't seen it yet, please make sure to watch it now, watch it next, watch it later, watch it soon. Now I've wanted to make an update to that video for months now because I've learned even more about those early days of the Air Jordan 1, which is the shoe that started it all. Okay, let's go. Let's talk banned. First off, let's all agree that the Air Jordan was never banned. In fact, no shoe was technically banned. The term banned was Nike's creation, and possibly a brilliant one. We'll discuss that in another video. But here are the facts. I'm going to stick to the facts and a few assumptions and some gray areas. But let's start with fact number one. Jordan wore black and red Nike Airships in several preseason games his rookie year in 1984. They were custom shoes, different from the Airships released to the public. MJ's were a mid, and they had a different midsole and different outsole, and they had Air Jordan written on the back instead of Nike Air. These shoes were a big controversy from day one. They stood out. I mean, most shoes back then were mostly white, so a pair that were all black with a little bit of red on them were very noticeable right from the beginning in Bulls training camp. Now, from Hoops magazine, January '85, the snazzy black shoes with red stripes Jordan has been wearing are an attention getter. And then he goes on to quote the trainer, "He's wearing those shoes for a reason. This is like our quarterback drill. He's wearing those so nobody will hit him." Now here it is, day 4 in training. The shoes are snazzy. They're called attention getters. He specifically calls them that because some attention's good, probably some attention is bad. And then the trainer is already giving him a hard time about, not getting touched in practice. And we all know that's not true because Michael Jordan was as competitive in practices as he was in any game. He welcomed any challenge. Maybe they just hadn't learned that yet. But we got to remember, MJ was just a rookie. He didn't go number 1 in the draft. And the veterans, the Bulls staff, and the whole NBA, and later the whole country would be waiting to see if Jordan would be good. And here he is in training camp with snazzy shoes. I mean, you can just imagine the veterans like Orlando Woolridge or the commissioner of the NBA looking at this kid like, who does he think he is, Michael Jordan? Now this brings us to fact number 2. One of the preseason games was against the Knicks at Madison Square Garden, October 18th, 1984, and David Stern, the NBA commissioner, was at the game. Like everybody else, he notices the shoes. Now this brings us to kind of a gray area. I'm going to go ahead and number all these. This is gray area number 1. David Stern must have said something to the effect of, MJ can't wear those shoes, and maybe Bulls management even tipped him off to this because there's an article in Sports Illustrated, I think it's December 10th, 1984. Here we go. The Air Jordan sneakers, however, have already encountered some engine trouble on the tarmac. Now, first, don't make fun of Sports Illustrated for using the airline quote. I mean, it's fun. Okay, Jordan wore a pair of the black background red swoosh Nikes during the preseason, but the Bulls, worried about how Jordan would be perceived both around the NBA and by his teammates, had reservations about the shoe's gaudiness, and the NBA office objected to, citing rules about uniformity of uniforms. The league has threatened a $1,000 fine if Jordan wears them again, and $5,000 for the next offense after that. The Bulls were worried about the gaudiness of the shoes. They probably notified the NBA. Stern goes to the game, watches it, or maybe he's just there and watches it, doesn't like it, agrees with them, it doesn't work out, so he's upset. They're gonna threaten him with a fine, because it says the league has threatened a $1,000 fine. They didn't fine him, they threatened a fine, and $5,000 for every offense after that. So it's possible there were no fines. There's no evidence of that yet, but we'll get to that in a second. Now, but here's where this is a big problem, because MJ just signed with Nike. And it was a weird deal already because, he's a rookie. He wanted to go with Adidas, but they didn't match Nike's offer. And now, after agreeing to go with Nike, which was mostly dependent on having his own shoe and having a say in the design, the Air Jordan departure time was being delayed. Sorry about the airplane reference there. So, now Nike and MJ's agents had to scramble. Nike had to come up with other shoe designs or ideas, and the agents, had to try to work with the NBA and Nike to reach some kind of a compromise here. We're going to move on to fact number 3 here. Nike had come up with 2 designs for the Air Jordan, the home and away shoe, the black toe and the black red. You can call it the bread, whatever you want. But somehow the ban or the threat of the NBA fines by Stern causes Nike to come up with the Chicago colorway. That seems to be the compromise, and somehow that's the shoe they're going to go with and let him play in. Which brings me to my first assumption. I'm going to call this assumption number 1. apparently the NBA was okay with MJ rocking the Chicagos because here we go to fact number 4. He wore them for the first time on November 17th against the Sixers. That's the first time MJ wore Air Jordans in an NBA game. It's about a month after David Stern saw him in the black and red airships. So he wears these new Air Jordans in a few games in December and, throughout the rest of the season throughout 1985. So I'm going to make an assumption here. It's based on a lot of knowledge. Assumption number 2. The NBA may have followed through with a fine or 2 or 3 or some, or maybe it was part of their compromise with the NBA and Nike and the agents, because Peter Moore seems to remember that Nike paid a fine or 2 for Michael, but there's no proof of that. Nothing has surfaced yet. So maybe there was 1 or 2 fines, but I doubt there were $5,000 fines for every time he wore the Chicagos, which would have been a lot of games his rookie year. Which brings me to fact number 5. MJ wears the black and red Air Jordans in the dunk contest at the 1985 All-Star Game. The NBA and David Stern were likely at the All-Star Game. I think we all know that. So that's likely what prompted the famous February 25th letter reminding Nike about the game on or before October 18th, and the letter was to Rob Strasser, and there was no mention of any fines for the Chicagos that have accumulated. I think it's pretty likely that the NBA had agreed to let him wear those shoes in November of '84, and he wore them a few times in December, he wore them in January, he wore them in February in NBA games, and I don't think that he was fined for wearing the shoes then or throughout the rest of the year or throughout the whole next season when he wore mostly the Air Jordan 1 Chicagos. So, once again, Air Jordans were not banned. They were airships. Were they banned in the first place? No, they were threatened with a fine. Were there fines ever put out by the NBA? Possibly. Still looking for information. I've been in contact with people at Nike and that have reached out to people that used to work there, that were there at that time, and no one's really willing to go on record with this, which leads me to believe that they remember there may have been a fine or 2, but it certainly wasn't that $5,000 every time he wore them that first season. So the old Nike folklore still out there. We're still looking for proof that any fines were paid. There's proof out there if there were fines paid. I'm going to give a huge shout out to MJO23 Dan. He's here on YouTube. He's on Instagram. I'm also on Instagram at Channel Chris. He's dug this story up years ago and has been a valuable resource. You got to check him out. Follow him both places if you haven't already. And I just want to say, if there's anything that you want to find out about it, leave comments, because that's the reason why I made this video. Everyone kept commenting below on the other video, like, why were the shoes banned? And so I just feel like this is something that needs to get out there. People are asking for this. So really appreciate you guys, your comments, and come on over to Instagram and do a follow.